live.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay. It looks like it's broadcasting.
Awesome.
Taylor, did you say you can see it?
Yeah, I could see it earlier. Let's see.
Okay.
Still good.
Good.
I just tweeted about it from my account.
Perfect.
Yeah, Chris is here. Chris did not read the book. But I did summarize what I...
what your thoughts were.
Well, no. Full disclosure right off the bat, I didn't end up finishing the book. But I have read it before, and I got really close to the end, and then I ended up being like, Carol, please tell me in detail what happens at the end. So what?
That is totally fine. I know you're not fond of this book.
Yeah, I really liked it the first time I read it, and then this time around I hated it a whole lot. So
yeah.
I was just having a hard time mentally forcing myself to read it, and then I was also just really busy today.
Yeah. This was the
cut
book.
Christopher's hair. I went shopping for 3 hours for stuff for our vacation that we need. I watched Christopher's 2-hour live stream. I was doing a lot of stuff where I just couldn't listen to it during.
Yeah.
I slept in until 8:30.
Yeah. I remember this live show or this book discussion was the one I was super nervous for, because I know a lot of people don't like this book, but I like it.
It was really stupid, and I feel like once you get on board with that, it's fine.
It's just nuts, and you have to accept it's just gonna be wild. And then yeah. Well, and I was telling Giselle earlier, and we'll talk about this more once we officially start discussing the book, but I have a lot of personal reasons I connected to this book that I'm gonna talk about, and full disclosure about why this is one of the books in the series where it's I can't be objective about it, and I'm openly admitting that. Yeah, so it's I'm not blind to the book's many flaws. It's just there are other things about it that still make it important for me.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that's 110% valid. Everyone has those books, and if it makes you feel better, I enjoyed it well enough.
Yeah. It's I had fun reading it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's normal to have I feel when I review books in general, I try to pretty much balance objective merit discussion with my personal enjoyment. So if a book is really well written, but I hated every second I spent reading it, I'm not going to give it 5 stars just because it's a good book, But yeah. I can also recognize just because I didn't enjoy a book, it doesn't make it a bad book. So I feel as long as I disclose when I'm being objective versus subjective, I feel that's okay to.
Yeah.
Like you said, we all have those books where it's I cannot review this objectively.
Yeah. Everyone has those books that they love. For me, currently it's Harry Potter, because of all the J.K. Rowling nonsense.
Oh my god. I saw somebody, I don't remember who it was, but I think it was on Twitter, they were despite J.K. Rowling's best efforts, I'm always going to love Harry Potter or something.
That is the biggest mood.
Yeah.
I do have some strange notes that I took on my phone. I have actually exactly 3 notes, and that's all I took. And it's just random stuff that made me kind of go like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I had, there were some things that I marked while I was reading that basically the tab is just like, what? Like, why? Yeah.
I feel like that was the entire book.
Yes. Well, and also, like, there's that whole thing, like, I don't know if you guys, or I guess it'd be Giselle, if you remember this, because I think, Taylor, you said you haven't read from 6th book on, right? You haven't read any of these?
Whichever, I think it was the 5th book. I read halfway through the 5th book and then I stopped.
Right. So I remember right before this one came out, I heard weird rumors about, like, the cover and the title and how, like, the cover artist or whoever heard that the title was The Atlantis Complex. And so they were like, oh, like, Atlantis underwater. I'm going to draw Artemis underwater with, like, a giant squid or, like, whatever. And it turns out Eoin Colfer was actually just planning to focus on the actual, like, disease, the Atlantis Complex. Like, he wasn't intending to set it, like, underwater. And then I don't know if, like, I don't see how this could happen. I don't see how there could be, like, no time to change the cover. But however that happened, I remember hearing that, like, Eoin Colfer found out about this and was like, all right, well, I guess they're going underwater. Like, I guess they're going to So if that's true, I think it's remarkable that the book wasn't worse than it was. Like,
I can also kind of believe it. Like, I can believe that's how it went down.
Yeah. Well, because, like, you hear about things like this happening with publishing houses where you're like, how did this happen? And yet it did. Like, somehow there were, like, all these coincidences that made something like this happen. So it's like, it is possible. And
yeah.
it would explain a lot.
Sorry, I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm, like, going through a lot of, like, the travel stuff that we bought today, and I'm, like, taking it out of packaging and stuff like that. So if I'm making noises, I apologize.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think we're kind of waiting for Yvette and Priscilla anyway. I know they're usually, they usually join in, so. And, like, plus I was a couple minutes late to start this, so.
Yeah. Nope, that's the wrong Twitter I used. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I retweeted it from the Artemis Fowl account.
Great.
Oh. That's why I was confused. I was on my work Twitter for a second. Let me put it back to regular Twitter. Okay. I've got my 3 notes open and ready to go.
Yeah, actual, like, planning notes. I have a few things that I want to specifically talk about, but yeah, I didn't end up taking tons of notes for this one.
There were so many times where I was like, oh, I should mark that, or I wish it, and I was just like, no. I just don't care enough. I don't have the willpower to, like, stop and do it.
Yep.
Okay, I will add that just like my last notes, these aren't especially profound. It's just things that I noticed that I was like, that's really bizarre. I don't have words, and I just wrote it down.
Yep.
There is one thing in particular that made me angry, but I'm sure you can probably guess what it is, considering what we discussed last time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm calling. I already called what it was to Kara like 2 days ago. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, Taylor's gonna freak out about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I wonder if you guys guessed right.
I think it's either Giselle. I think it's either what you said, or I have another idea about what it could be, based on the clue Taylor just gave us. Okay. I see. Okay. I don't know when you guys want to, like, start the discussion part.
I mean, we can talk about our like general thoughts, like overall star rating and stuff, and then use into an in-depth discussion.
Let's do that. Should I start, or what do you guys want to?
Either way, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay. So as we kind of talked about, I like this book in spite of a lot of things, and like specifically there's like some personal connections that I have to it that I think I give it a pass for a lot of things. So like when this book came out, I was in high school, and it was either the first time I read it or maybe like my first reread or whatever, but it was right around the time when my OCD was getting really bad, but I wasn't like admitting it was bad yet. So I read this book like right at that time. And I just remember like this was the first time I had ever read a book, any book that had a character with something that was kind of like OCD. And like Artemis obviously like it's a different thing. It's like, you know, it's part of a fictional story and there's all these like magical elements that obviously I didn't have. But like I remember feeling so like I don't know, like seen by that. Like there's that one part near the beginning where Artemis is, I think he's like clicking a handle like 20 times or something. And there's part of him that's scared that like this compulsion has like so much power over him. And then there's the other part of him that says like, I'll fix this tomorrow, but right now I just want it, like, I want this to give me comfort, you know, like it'll make me feel better to like listen to the OCD. And I just remember reading that and being like, oh my God, because I had that, like that exact thought, like those exact words almost about when like mine was getting really bad. And like Artemis had been one of my favorite characters I've ever read for years at that point. Like since I was little, I like loved Artemis. I loved these books. And so to see one of my favorite characters having something similar that I did, and like it wasn't like I mean, there's a lot of things about the way mental health is handled in this book that I think would be more sensitively done now. Like there's a lot of things that it like didn't do the best. But to see like one of my favorite characters struggle with something I did and it didn't like define him, like it was scary and it was presented as like a real thing he's dealing with. Like it's not like he could just like decide I'm not going to worry about the number 4 anymore, like whatever. So it was a real threat, but it also didn't like completely take over his character. Like he was still smart, and it wasn't like he was weaker because he had this problem. And like that just like meant a lot to me to like see one of my favorite like books have something like that. Like I just remember that being like a really powerful experience for me. And like my like the whole OCD thing, like I'm doing a lot better now. But I still read this book and I remember how much that meant, you know, and it's still like I still like see myself in some of the things that Artemis does, and like the fact that he's a genius, and like that fear of being like trapped in your own mind. And it's like how do you get better when the problem is like in your head? Anyway, so like that's kind of the personal reason that this book like meant a lot to me. And then in addition to that, I just remember enjoying how like totally out of left field this book is. Like it's weird, some of it's kind of dumb, but it's fun. And I remember it being kind of a nice break between the really intense 6th book and the really intense 8th book. Like I remember it being kind of a nice like, okay, we can take a breather. This doesn't make sense in a lot of ways, but like overall it's kind of fun. So I liked that, and I liked some of the banter and the fact that we got Foley and Juliet back. That was amazing. I loved having Juliet back. Like it made me so happy. So yeah, like those are my more like objective reasons I enjoyed it. But I also have that like personal connection to it that yeah, it's like I can't like separate that from my feelings on the book. So I think I gave it 4 stars because yeah, it just like means a lot to me. So that's like my story time about this book.
That's like a good place to start because I mean, you know, I really like that you opened up about that, and I can totally see how that would be very meaningful to you. So
yeah.
Do you want to go, Giselle, or should I?
Sure. I didn't like it. Well, like I said, I didn't even finish it. I don't know. didn't like anything really about it. Overall, I just feel like the characters don't really feel like themselves for a lot of it. I think they're making a lot of decisions that they wouldn't normally make, and that their reactions felt kind of like off to me. And everything was just so over the top in this book. Like, everything was so, like, out of left field and very dramatic and everything. And I don't know. I was kind of like, just like over it the whole time. Like, no. I don't know. Like, I can see why other people would like this, but just like from the beginning. And also, like, I feel like the last time I read it, I remember thinking like Orion was like really funny and like I really like enjoyed that, but like he was just like really sexist and had all these like very like antiquated ideas that I was just like, I don't need this. Like, and we don't need young children reading about this either. Like, please no. I don't know. There was just like a lot of things just rubbed me wrong. Although I did like that. I feel like this is the first book that we've actually had like fully in person.
Yeah.
Like, occasionally we'll spend a little bit of time with him, but he's like always by himself and like researching stuff or whatever. Like, this is like the first book that we've actually like had fully with us. So I did enjoy that, but just didn't really work for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I felt like this book, I think I liked it similarly to how I like the Dresden Files, in that it's really, really dumb, but once you accept how dumb it is, it's kind of a fun ride. Like, you know, like you guys have been saying, there's a lot of out of left field stuff. There's some really bizarre stuff. I mean, like, I'm trying to go to my notes without going too deep into my notes, you know, deep into the 3 notes I took. There's some phrases that are very repetitive in this book. I don't know if you've noticed, but everyone is getting hit in the solar plexus in this book. Like, everyone.
Yeah.
After like the 3rd or 4th time, I was like, okay, I need to keep a note of this. This is really weird. It was oddly violent and adult in some parts. Like, there were some parts that I was like, okay, this is for kids. Calm down. There's like a high body count and like swearing and weird phrasing to describe Holly and Artemis that I really didn't enjoy. But I liked it. It was fun to listen to, especially since Butler got a lot of time to himself. I really like the voice Nathaniel Parker uses for Butler, so that was a nice time for me. Yeah, I think it's going to be a solid 3.5 stars for me because I did have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm going to wait to rate it until I'm going to finish it over the next few days. Like, I am going to finish it. I just couldn't make it happen before this. I'm going to wait to rate it until then, but I'm leaning towards like a 1.5. Wow. I really didn't like it at all.
Interesting. Okay. No, the lowest I think I rated any Artemis Fowl book was like 2.5 or something. So
yeah.
And that was the 5th one.
Yeah, that's my least favorite too so far. Yeah, Taylor, you brought up something really good, like really interesting, that actually was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Which I think we can go ahead and just get into the discussion and people will catch up when they join, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned how adult and like violent this book felt, and that was one of the things I was going to talk about, because this book does have one of the highest body counts, I think, out of the whole series. And I actually wanted to ask you guys how you felt about the villain for this book, because like I think that kind of ties into how adult feeling this one felt. Like, we have like characters that we actually know who died. Like, I mean, Vishpi, like, we meet him in book 3 or 4, and he's not super important, but I don't remember another time yet that we've lost like we've watched the death of a character that we like knew by name, you know, like that wasn't like a main character that they made like a big thing about. Like normally it's like if we're gonna have deaths, it's gonna be like a couple of henchmen who we never interact with, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like what did you guys feel about like that general tone of this book, and then we can talk about the villain separately if you guys want to.
I don't know. One of the things I didn't like was just like how like Vinyaya died and like all these other people, and it's like not even like really touched on. It's just kind of like they're dead, and then everyone just like moves on, and like it's never like I feel like it was never really like fully like discussed, or like the characters were not.
Sorry, I'm trying to get used to this.
Oh, you're fine. And maybe he was like the characters just didn't feel like as upset or distraught by this as like I feel like they should be. Like once they're in the shuttle and everything's safe and they're like just following the probe and nobody's like, holy crap, Vinyaya, and then all the elves just died. Like nobody even said that. They're just like, we're talking about other stuff and like making jokes and talking about like I don't know, just like all these jokes with Orion and stuff and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, does nobody care about the 15 people that just died?
I
like,
know. Yeah.
I feel like if Eoin Colfer was going to make the choice to make it as like adult and have like all these like, and not even just like a high body count, but also talking about like immortality and humans living forever and the like love spell thing.
Yeah.
And,
oh, that's
like
on my
all
list.
these other things that are super adult. If he's gonna put all the stuff in there, that he needs to take the time to flush them out better, because I feel like it was too glossed over too quickly and made me feel very disconnected from it. Like I didn't actually think that they had died for like half the book. So I'm like, nobody's talking about this. How is nobody talking about this? But so Eoin Colfer won't give them the time to like mourn this character that has been there since like book 1, but we'll spend like 2 minutes describing like a baby doing cartwheels and somebody eating his poopy diaper. Like, get your priorities straight.
Yeah. Chris
Sorry.
had a good comment that one of the fancy things we can do with this software is show the comments. He said like maybe he thought the audience was growing up, so he grew the story up a bit, and he compares it to Harry Potter doing that. And I think that's a good point. I definitely noticed that with the last few books in the series. I mean, arguably starting with book 5, but I think definitely book 6 we see that shift. I do think it could have been handled better, because I was also really jarred by how little everyone seemed to care about Vinyaya, especially. And like this whole transport ship full of people. Like there are references to it, and I get that they're in the middle of like some really life or death situations. I can understand like, okay, we'll deal with the emotional stuff after we save like Atlantis, you know, after we like get the rest of these people out, okay. But yeah, I do think there should have been more like explicit grieving, because we have characters thinking about it. Like I remember Holly a couple of times throughout the book, she'll see something that makes her remember that this like all of these people just died, and she's like, okay, don't think about that now, we have to do this other thing. So I like that people thought about it, but I wish it would have been more verbal, or more like I don't know, just like more like explicit and spelled out, that like everyone's acknowledging like we lost like 16 people today.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to write adult situations, you also have to add an adult payoff, you know? Like, I don't know. I, like you, Giselle, I didn't even know Vinyaya died until like, I guess like 15 minutes after it had happened. And I was like, wait, did she die? And I had to like go back and like, oh, she died, and I guess no one cares.
Yeah. And it's also, like even in like Harry Potter 6 or whatever, when there's like Dumbledore's death, and yeah, the whole castle's like full of Death Eaters, and Harry's like on the run under the cloak and freaking out and like all this stuff, but like and there's like a battle right then and so many things going on, but there's still that like grief. And then once the battle's over, then they have this grieving situation. And I feel like we didn't get this in this book.
Yeah. Also, like, there's the issue that like 2 commanders in a row have been horribly murdered. Like, at this point, it's like, is this job cursed? Like, I would not
against the dark arts.
Yeah, it's like I would not want to be a commander. Like, do not promote Holly. We'll lose her.
Trouble makes that like super insensitive comment to Holly as well, and like blames her. Do you remember that when when Trouble's like, "Oh, 2 commanders have died because of you now," and I was like, "What the actual flaming F, Trouble? What is wrong with you? Why would you put that on them?" And she's just like, "That's not true." And he's like, "Yeah, it's not." And I'm like, "Why would you say it then? You're such an asshole." Like,
yeah, I did not like Trouble in this book. Like, the little glimpses we had gotten of him before, I liked him, like, more or less. Like, he was interesting. And then this one, I'm just like, who are you? Get out of here.
That's kind of also the title of the book. Who are you?
Yeah, that's true. So going off of the tone of this book, I want to talk about Turnbull Root as the villain. So Giselle and I were talking about this earlier, but I don't think we talked too much about the like extra stories, like the bonus content. We decided not to make that part of the read along, and we actually see Turnbull earlier in the short story that basically covers Holly's initiation into Leprechaun. It's sort of like a survival type situation that like all the cadets get tested with, and she ends up having to take him down. It wasn't like part of the test, but she ends up having to like defeat him and everything. So we have seen him before.
Important to note that story came out between like book 1 and 2 or book 2 or 3. Like it came out right at the beginning. It's not like
okay.
It's not like he wrote it like in book 6 or book 7. He decided like, oh, I need to make sure so that this character's in there. Like it came out right at the beginning. I read that story. I remember reading that story and I was like, isn't Turnbull in the 0.5? And I had to ask Kara that. She's like, yeah, that was the guy in 0.5.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah, so he was kind of like bringing back a villain, which I actually like. I feel like Turnbull was one of the more successful villains of this series for me because I hated him. Like, he was obviously bad, but he didn't irritate me like Opal does. like I think he had a good balance of being like threatening without being annoying, you know, like because you're supposed to hate the villain, right? When it's not like a sympathetic like written character, it's like you're supposed to hate the villain, but they're not supposed to annoy you to the point where it's like, why are you even here? Like, you know, you should like understand their purpose in the story. And I feel like Turnbull, like, he honestly was one of the ones that scared me the most because he's so like calm and logical about the fact that like him getting his wife back is more important than a hospital full of people. Like, he's scary because he's so like matter of fact about it. And there's also the thing that like Taylor, you kind of mentioned that I had also put down to talk about, like the way that he got his wife is super freaky, like super disturbing. And the book tells us like, oh, well, she was like starting to fall in love with him anyway. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'll give you that. But it's still like essentially like mind rape, you know, like it's really disturbing. So I feel like he's done like apart from Opal, I think he has the highest body count of the series villains. So I don't know. I just wanted to hear what you guys thought about him like as the villain character for this book.
Kara, I don't know if you remember from the 0.5. Does it talk about his special kind of magic in that?
No, it doesn't. But I think when it's talking about his like the runes in this book, they do make the point that at that point he hadn't learned how to do this yet.
Yes, he had, because he already had his wife, right? When he was taken into captivity, he already had his wife.
Was he? Or did he use the rune on her later? That's what I thought.
But he had already like met his wife.
Yeah, he had already met her, but I don't think he put, or was that only a couple of months? I don't know the timeline in these books very well.
I think he was already taken into captivity, so he like this magic, he already had it. I don't know. I just like, I think that I don't know. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the Harry Potter series, but J.K. Rowling did build a lot of stuff from the beginning of the series that tied in later, and I felt like it tied in very well. That she was able to, that things in book 2 were super important to book 6 and book 7, and that even like Voldemort not truly being dead was a theme from like the first book, and like there's all these things of how it ties in. And then this, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna like have this sprite from the first book now all of a sudden be important and be the only fairy like ever to like know this secret. And also I'm going to introduce this new type of magic that nobody has ever used before and make it this his type of magic so that he can have magic. So then like that introduces stuff like, oh well, like then Mulch could technically be using magic too if he did this. And it's just like, I don't know, just like so much of it I feel like was just so like he just wanted to do whatever he wanted and didn't care about keeping things consistent with the rest of the series. And I wasn't a big fan of how a lot of the stuff was handled. I'm like, oh, all of a sudden there's this type of magic that nobody's ever heard of before, and like all these other things. And
we did see the black magic runes in the 6th book. Like they weren't like imprinted on people's skin, but like that's how Holly and Number 1 were enchanted in the barrel of animal fat.
Okay.
Really?
Like they do mention like evil runes in that one, but yeah, no, I understand. Like I guess like the inconsistency of that has never bothered me because I think I got used to that to some extent. Like
got you like, the inconsistency.
Yeah. Because I think like the Harry Potter books were kind of unusual in that there was so much consistency throughout. Like there were so many things that were hinted from the beginning that you didn't realize till later. I'm not saying that like no other books did that because that's not true, but I just remember, especially when I was younger and reading series, like unless something was like blatantly like this contradicts like half of what you told us like 2 books ago, like it didn't like surprise me. Like I remember the Aragon books, and I won't spoil them in case you guys plan to read them or haven't read them yet, but there's like this huge thing that happens in book 3 where I'm like, how has like nobody in 2 or 3 like 800-page books like mentioned this thing? Like, so unless it's something like really like glaringly like contradictory, I guess it didn't like bother me. Yeah.
I feel like there are glaring contradictions.
Oh no, like there are for sure. But I enjoy it. Like, I don't know. It just the one that like still irritates me the most though is that Eoin Colfer clearly does not give a shit about how tall his characters are. Because like none of this makes sense with that. Like even Turnbull and Leonor, like there was never any mention of the fact that like her husband is like supposed to be 3 feet tall.
I guess
she's a human.
She does like, mention that she's really short for a human.
I thought it also mentioned that she was kind of aware that he wasn't entirely human, but I guess she kind of like brushed it off.
Yeah. I just like for some reason that's the one that gets me, even though it's not the most glaringly obvious. Like that's the one that really irritates me as being like, oh no, just make up your mind. half of your character like interactions wouldn't make any sense.
So for me, I didn't read any of the short stories. So I actually thought that Turnbull, who I kept, even though I was listening to the audiobook, in my head it's going to be Turnip, but Turnbull, he, it was just so weird to have him go, oh, this is Julius Root's long-lost delinquent brother. He's here, and he's our villain now. So I didn't know he was, like, a character in previous books. So I was like, my first thought was that was incredibly stupid, but I kind of embraced stupidity when listening to this book, so I guess I was fine with it. But now that I know that he was a character before, I think I'm a little more forgiving. The sort of quasi rape storyline is very much brushed off, which I guess for a children's book, I don't know how they're going to really get into the implications of his relationship with his wife. It's very Fantastic Beasts too.
Oh no. I think they kind of tried to slightly address it when they were like, she had been falling in love with him anyway, and this just made her like stay with him and forget him, or forget about like wanting to fly again and leave him. And I'm like, it's still bad. Like it's still I mean,
even if not great.
Yeah, like even if we accept that, like, okay, the omniscient narrator, it's like we don't have to argue, like, oh well, how do we know that she actually did love him before this? Like, even if we accept that that's true, and she did fall in love with him partially before this happened, I'm like, you still don't do that. Like, even if somebody, like, even if you're in love with someone and they're in love with you, it's still not consensual, like, to do to like hypnotize them into staying with you forever. Like, no.
And even when he wasn't hypnotizing her, when they were like, when he had his minions like nursing her back to health, and he would show up just as she woke up, so it would look like he would, like, from the beginning, he manipulated their relationship. And it seems to also go unexamined by her up until they both die. I'm like, okay, you're not gonna get a little bit angry? I thought she was going to turn on him the whole time. Or something. I guess not.
She sort of like, she didn't turn on him, but she did, like, when she realized that he was the bad guy, she was like, no, like, I'm not helping you do this. But yeah, it's like there wasn't really a point. Like, she says, like, oh, well, like, you did terrible things, but there's part of me that's always gonna love you. And I'm like, why though?
Sometimes it just be like that.
Yeah. It can be like that. Yeah. I hated how some of the characters acted like, because Turnbull didn't blow up the hospital, he like redeemed himself at the end. And I'm like, he did not. Like, just because he refrained from doing this last awful thing does not make him a good person. And like I think Artemis at one point, I might have even marked that line. Let me see if I did.
Is it where it was like he didn't even see him as a villain or something?
So he said, this adventure was different, Holly. Usually someone wins and we are better off at the end. But this time, so many people died, innocents, and no one has benefited. So it sounds like, okay, he's accepted that, like, he's a bad guy. And all for love. I can't even think of Turnbull as a villain. All he wanted was his wife back. And I'm like, no. Like, that's... like, in a way, I think it's kind of consistent with Artemis's character. Like, this is another thing I was talking to Giselle about when we were like, when I was like summarizing the end. It kind of makes sense because we've seen, I feel like one of Artemis's fatal flaws is that he's willing to do like really, really terrible things if it's for somebody he cares about. It's sort of like he is starting to become a better person who like values the lives of people who are not close to him, but we still see that, I mean, like in book 6, like think of all the awful things he did because it was his mom who got sick, like personally. So I feel like it's sort of in line with his general personality to be almost like somewhat sympathetic towards him, because it's like, yeah, he did terrible things, but he did it for like a good reason. But I still wish we would have had like other characters challenge that. Like he says it to Holly. I would have thought Holly would be like, yeah, too bad he still killed like this many people. Like,
including like her fellow like men-in-arms and like Vinyaya, like, and I don't know, I think I could be more sympathetic with the whole like there was never really a villain thing if Turnbull didn't manipulate his wife into loving him from day one. If it was like a genuine love and she grew old, I think you could make a better argument for he's a more morally gray villain. But the fact that, you know, he manipulated her into loving him, and all of this just dark stuff, held her basically hostage, and wouldn't let her fly. You know, I can't really believe that it was the whole "it's all for love" thing, and it was kind of icky.
It was very icky, yeah. Yeah, and also just like even if we set aside like what he did to Leonor and just look at his other actions, he's still bad. Like he's still just like consistently a terrible person because I mean he's so willing to kill like anybody, like even the people on his side. Like he's thinking about Eunuchs, that sprite that doesn't have wings anymore. He's like, if he ever like turns against me, I'll need to put him down like a dog. And
yeah,
like there's the fact that like he lets like this whole transport ship full of his former allies get killed in like a really horrifying way because they didn't like sign up to go back on his team like quick enough. Like the fact that he blew up that ship full of people, like the fact that he fantasizes about murdering people even ones who have like helped him. I'm like, he's like, even if you set aside all the horrible things, like the sketchy things he did with his wife, it's like nothing about him says like, oh well, he did bad things for good reasons. I'm like, he's just like sadistic. Like,
yeah. It, like, not to bring up Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them too again, because the less we talk about that film, the better the world is. But J.K. Rowling was clearly trying to do the same thing with Grindelwald, where it's like, oh, you could see how he could be a good guy, or you see his point of view, but in his first like in the first hour of the film, he murdered a baby. So yeah, like that sort of framing just it's very tricky to pull off, and I don't think Eoin Colfer did, because even if you take away the whole he did it for love and stuff, you take that away and you now you have a mass murderer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's almost like if he had just left it with, okay, like Turnbull decides to go with his wife, because like it's kind of an abrupt change for him, but I'm like, it does sort of make sense because he's proven that literally the only thing in the world he cares about is his wife. So if she's gone, I'm like, okay, I can maybe accept that he'd be willing to like die with her. But if Eoin Colfer had just like left it there, I think it would have been more effective, because then like you read the book and it's like, okay, well he's still a bad person, but like the fact that like you would still have that like suggestion of like he did maybe truly love her, like it would be enough to be interesting. But by having characters try to like justify it or explain it, I'm like, no, like not like that doesn't fly. Like we didn't have enough, like we had no evidence that he was like a morally gray villain or something. It was like he's a bad guy who did bad things up until like the last possible second of his life.
I think it also could have been interesting because you brought up the fact that Artemis Fowl works a very similar way in that he's willing to do terrible things for the people he loves. I think that could have been a great opportunity to sort of hold a mirror up to Artemis and go, this is who you could have become if you had gone down, a completely different path. But, you've changed and you're a better person. You could have done something with that. But I guess they didn't.
Yeah. Well, and I remember one of our earlier discussions. It was like one of the first couple books in the series. And we were talking about that. And I mentioned like one of the things I do really appreciate about this series is like that kind of element, like that idea that it brings up once in a while about like just loving someone doesn't automatically make you a good person, like I mean, we see like when we get, especially in book 6, when we get like flashback to young Artemis, he did like horrifying things and he justified it by saying it's for my father. So I think that would have been like a really interesting way to kind of continue that theme if you had left Turnbull as like this really bad person who had this spark of actual like feeling,
Yeah. I don't know if you still have anything else to say about Turnbull, but can we talk about Artemis and Holly?
Yeah.
I wanted that.
I knew that was the thing.
Like they refer to it as a moment of passion with Artemis.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Also, like Foley does not react like at all appropriately. Like I feel like this is another example of like Colfer not really thinking of the implications of how old his characters are, because like if we're supposed to believe that Holly's like the equivalent of in her 20s and he finds out that like she kissed like a 14-year-old, or I guess when he was back in time he was like 15 anyway, like still like a teenage boy, his reaction should have been like WTF, like what? Because this is even before, like this is even before he finds out that like they like their ages got scrambled and like whatever, like before there were any questions asked about like how this had happened, he's just like, oh, that's weird, like don't remember reading that in your report. And I'm like, like this is just, I don't know. I feel like it's more evidence of Colfer being like, I don't know how old they are. Don't worry about it. Like,
yeah, because like even the way Holly acts, she acts like someone in her early 20s. She doesn't act like a teenager. So even if Owen was like, oh, well, she was like 16 the whole time or whatever, like that's not how he wrote her. And also, like, I don't know if they ever specified kiss, but at least they said moment of passion. And I was like, nasty, 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 nasty.
It sounded worse than it even was.
He is a boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I hated that. I hate the whole Artemis Holly thing. I don't even really like that Artemis has a crush or any sort of romantic or like, I guess, sexual feelings towards Holly. I hate it. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he definitely has a crush on her. I didn't get the feeling it was necessarily sexual because
yeah.
I feel like that would have been like telegraphed to the reader. Like, if, I don't know, I feel like in other books I've read when the main character is a teenage boy who has like feelings that have a sexual component, it's like you hear about it. Like, you know what's going on. So, I don't know. Giselle, what do you think? Sorry, I've kind of been like talking a lot here.
No, you're fine. I don't know. I don't like how anything was handled in this, including that. Yeah, everybody's reactions were just like so, I feel like so out of character. Everything was just so out of character. Like nobody reacted in like reasonable, plausible ways. I don't know. I feel like he just, sorry, I've just been having a hard time expressing myself the past few days. I feel like my brain like leaked out of my ears. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think Foley's reaction was normal, and the phrasing wasn't the best there. And I don't really have anything new to add. I agree with everything you've been saying, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was against the kiss in the first place, and I don't think it ever should have happened, personally. And I don't know, the fact that they brought it up again was like, I honestly wouldn't have even minded if they brought it up from Artemis's perspective, like, oh, Artemis has a crush on Holly, and Orion like was embarrassing him that way, and it was on Artemis rather than on Holly. You know what I mean? And Holly could get like a little bit flustered and like, oh, he's a kid, he's a child, and I'm not into that. But they don't play it that way.
Yeah.
And I really just
I feel like Colfer was sending a lot of mixed signals in this book about how he felt about like including that in the last one, because like in a way you could read it either direction. Like, okay, he's trying to like shoot that down by making it, oh well, Artemis's like alter ego is the one who's hitting on Holly now, and like Orion does mention like that, like he blatantly tells everybody that like, oh yeah, Artemis is like super in love with Holly, but he should take it on better. So like you could almost argue that like, okay, well maybe Colfer's trying to back off from it because he's sort of like distancing Artemis from like the feeling. He's like, oh well, it's his alter ego now, kind of thing. But yeah, it's like at the same time there's no like explicit calling out of like, that was a mistake that should not have happened and here's why. Like it's very muddled. And like the fact that the villain in this one is a fairy who was in love with a human, I feel like that's also sort of a weird like double message to send. Like I don't know, I don't know what his like intent was with their relationship here.
Yeah. I still feel like Eoin Colfer just got a little too rowdy and wrote this book. Like, he didn't plan it. He just sat down and wrote it with, like, I don't know, a bottle of Jack Daniels or something.
Yeah.
In keeping with the very adult themes here, didn't they say, like, the word jackass, like, 3 times in this book?
They
did.
That
was very jarring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were my 3 notes.
I guess he thought he could get away with it because he's like, like the donkey.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, there was just like, there was more adult humor all around. Like there's that line. So like, okay, Orion could get very annoying, but some of his lines I thought were funny. Like he occasionally entertained me. But one that I did not like was when he was talking to Foley, and he was like, "Oh, we have to like search my naked body for a birthmark that proves I'm the princess somewhere." And then later, like they're all, I think Holly's woken up at this point, and like Orion says something to Holly again, and Foley says, "If he asks you to check him for birthmarks, say no immediately." And I'm like, what? What? Like, this is, I mean, obviously it's not like the most mature humor any of us have ever read, but it was kind of jarring because there wasn't like I feel like there wasn't any kind of, I don't know, there wasn't that kind of joking before, and now
yeah, it's very adult, and not that that's bad necessarily. It's just really weird when you sort of juxtapose it with like, oh, someone's getting hit in the face with a dirty diaper, and Mulch's whole existence, you know, it doesn't fit because you have to decide between 12-year-old humor and weird sex joke humor. So
yeah, it was like a sex joke essentially. It was just like slightly concealed by talking about other
yeah
things. But yeah, no, I thought that whole thing was weird. I wonder, it's sort of, I wonder if he was like trying to provide like comic relief because this book was so dark in some places, but like, I don't know, I don't think that always succeeded, because like I think there's a fine line between like, oh, having some comic relief so that you don't get bogged down in how serious everything is. There's like a fine line between that and like, it seems like no one is taking this bad stuff seriously, and
yeah
I feel like he ended up on that side of it a lot. Like,
yeah
yeah, I did appreciate though, like, for the most part, it seemed like the characters were pretty, like, they weren't like joking about Artemis having a mental illness. Like, for the most part, like there were a couple of like joking references to it, but like I distinctly remember Artemis himself like makes a joke about it or whatever, and Holly's like, "That's not funny. Like, we need to, like, you need help," kind of thing. So I don't know. I feel
does say something about Artemis being damaged.
What?
I said Foley does say something about Artemis being damaged.
Yeah, I marked that. I did not like that at all, and that kind of fits into what?
That one really stuck out to me. I was
like,
ooh.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was thinking of when I was saying earlier, like, there's a lot of things about it that would be done much more sensitively today. Like, you would never use the word damage to describe someone. But I feel like, oh, it's
like more of like a first person thing, like inside a character's head.
Yeah.
And then again, you would like try to like unvalidate that thing though, because like I feel like everyone who's like suffered from mental illness has definitely felt that and is like feel like they're broken inside and stuff. But like to have someone on the outside saying that to them is like, oh
yeah. And it's weird too because other aspects of it felt very, very honest to me. Like, I don't know if Eoin Colfer has had like experience with OCD or any kind of like related issue, but there were like several places that felt very like familiar to me as like being afraid of like your own head and like thinking like, oh, I used to be so smart, like does this make me like stupid now, and things like that. Like, there were some things that I think were really well done, but yeah, there were places where it was like this is really not, like, we wouldn't talk about it like this now. And we're actually, when was this published? I'm just curious now.
I think.
Was it 2010? I think you're right. Yeah. So like, I guess that makes it, it's like, okay, that was like 9 years ago, which, not that it was okay to do then, but I think like the mental health discussion was still very much in like the early stages. I seem to remember, like, if we were gonna have a character with mental illness at all, like that was pretty like progressive at the time, you know. So, which, like, not that that makes it okay, but I think that
even having kind of an example illness in 2010 was like a very bold thing for
and to have it treated in a way that was like, it's a real thing, like it's not like a, oh, just get over it and you'll be fine.
And he goes to therapy at the end.
He does. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember how book 8 starts, because I don't think they make it a big thing in the next book. So like, yeah, I mean, we'll see when we get there, obviously, but I think it should have had more time to resolve, if that is what's going to happen. I don't remember how they resolve it, but at least in this book, I think that there were more things done right than I would have expected. You know, like going back and reading it now, I was kind of like, oh, is this going to be like super problematic? And like some of it was, like the damaged thing.
Yeah.
But some of it was like, I haven't read many books now that like actually make this part feel as like honest or as like compassionate, I guess like compassionate is kind of the word I'm looking for, is like it never felt like the book was trying to tell us Artemis was broken, you know, like even if other characters didn't respond to it in the best way, it was like you as the reader didn't feel like the author's perspective was like, oh, you're weak if you have mental illness kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let me see what else I had on my list. Oh, so the ending of this book was super abrupt, I felt. Like when I was giving Giselle my like very poorly explained summary of the last chunk of this book, like I told her like I was like 10 pages from the end, and we were just at like the main like showdown, like the climax of the story between like Turnbull and his gang and like Artemis and Holly and like all of them. Like that was like that's where we were, and I'm like, how are they gonna wrap all of this up in 10 pages? And they kind of didn't. It was just like I mean, like they fixed like oh, like Turnbull and Leonore are just gonna pilot the ambulance into the Mariana Trench or whatever, and then like we cut to Artemis in the hospital talking to Holly, and then it's like, oh, Juliet is pretending to be a bad wrestler, and then she's gonna kick everyone's ass, and Butler's gonna go watch, and like that's how the book ends. It's like doesn't even end with the main character. So anyway, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I got to like the part that you were talking about when they're about to have the final showdown, and you know it was about an hour and a half before we were going to do this live show because that's just how I roll now. And I looked at my phone to see how much longer I have, and it says like 30 minutes, and I was like, there is no way that this is going to be done in 30 minutes. And then Juliet and Butler get like dropped like that, and that has no bearing on it, on anything that happens. And, you know, everything just sort of wraps up. And then they have the epilogue, like, as soon as Turnbull and Leonore end up dying. And I don't know, it was just very quick. And yeah, I feel like they could have drawn it out a bit more, but I also don't know entirely how they could have done that. So
right. Yeah.
Again, I just think that Eoin Colfer needs to learn how to manage what he puts in his books better. He needs to learn how to pace and what should be kept in the story and what should be taken out. Because if it's a worry of, oh, well, am I going to have enough room to add in extra 2 more pages or extra 10 more pages to make this feel more resolved and everything and make it more satisfying, but instead he like puts in a lot of other like random unnecessary things in other places of the books that I think really could have been edited out. I feel like he went on a ton of like really random little side tangents in this, but not tangents about things, just like random like info dumpy randomness about things that don't matter at all.
Well, like, I think
what really stood out was like the baby one.
That I thought that was so stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I love that we got to see Juliet actually like wrestling for a little bit, like doing her like Jade Princess thing. Like that was great. But like that whole like hypnotized audience thing was so stupid and unnecessary. And I remember not liking that scene, but it was like even more annoying than I remembered. Yeah, Giselle, I think you have a good point about like trying to do too much, because that's something I kept thinking too, and especially with like how abrupt the ending was. And like I know I told you guys earlier about like the weird cover change rumor that like may or may not have actually happened. But like even if that's not true, I feel like there's 2 like distinct parts to the main plot. There's like Artemis having Atlantis Complex, and there's all of the underwater stuff. And I feel like he tried to make both of those like the main, not like the main story, but like he tried to spend too much time on both of them, so like neither of them got enough time really. Yeah, it's like I don't feel like he prioritizes his subplots the best.
Yeah. Although I will say I did like the image of Butler just throwing people, you know?
Yeah.
He's way out of the crowd. I was like, you know what? It's stupid, but
yeah. You're like, I can't completely write off this scene because like,
yeah.
That's
there were a lot of descriptions of Butler's relative like largeness. And I was like, you know what? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it bumped up like an extra half-star rating.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's some characters where he's like so like Eoin Colfer is like so specific about like Butler is like 7 feet tall basically, and like all the seats are too small for him. And then there's some characters where it's like he has no idea how tall they are relative to each other. Like just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which again, like it wouldn't be such an issue if he didn't make it like such a big deal other times. Like we're told like a few times that fairies are all like 3 feet tall, but they're never written like they are. Like very rarely are they written like they are.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't realize until like this book basically that Foley is also 3 feet tall.
Yes.
He's like the size of a Shetland pony.
I really don't like that. Like
super weird.
For some reason, it makes like
that. Where did it say that?
When I think it's when Artemis is having one of his like episodes of like OCD, and he asks them to line up like tallest to smallest, and like Foley and Mulch are like fighting over like who's taller, and it made me realize like, oh, when they're saying like all fairies are 3 feet tall, they also mean centaurs.
I really hate that.
Like, I was picturing like horse-sized centaur.
Yes.
Chris said, "What? I always thought of him as this big, majestic centaur." Yes, I did too. I was picturing him like big, like the centaurs in Harry Potter, and like just like the general size of a normal horse. And apparently, he's like.
I remember reading that, but I was like, well, maybe it's just like a joke. Like maybe Mulch is too stupid to realize that he's short. But maybe it's just because I don't like the image of a small centaur. There's something so creepy about it.
It's so wrong to me. Like my brain just rebels against it. It's like
I mean, and even like centaurs, like if they were real, they would still be like a good like head taller than us, like at least, because even like a big horse like is up to like they're like really tall, so it's like probably 2 feet taller in general. So that means he's even a more miniature pony then if he's like the same height as like a 3-foot dwarf. Like he's like his body, his horse body is like this big.
I hate it so much.
I don't like the image of a little horseman running around my feet. Like I don't like that.
Because, I mean, and aren't dwarfs some of the shorter race of fairies?
I think so.
Maybe I'm just making that up from like normal mythology. But this revelation is awful, is what Christopher just said.
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry for inflicting it on all of you, but if I have to suffer, so do you.
Oh no. I'm
so
man. Now. This explains how he can fit in chairs, though.
Because
I was always like, how is he sitting in a chair? Like, it even said, like, earlier in the book that he was sitting in a chair. So he just perched on a tiny little... He's like, on a kitten on a chair. Oh my God.
And, like, it did say that he had to kind of, like, maneuver sort of weird because, like, it's weird for a centaur to, like, sit down. Like, you know, like a horse basically would, like, sit down on a chair. But Yeah, like there was no mention of like he could use this chair like a bed. Like he's so small.
Well, that's my nightmare for tonight.
Just vanish it with thoughts of Butler.
Nope.
He could like step on Foley.
I always thought Butler and Foley were like maybe not the exact same height, but like on a similar level.
Yeah. Well, like I'm always picturing Foley as being like at least like a normal horse size, like altogether. Maybe like a smallish horse, but still like a horse. So I'm picturing whenever he's talking to Holly, that he's like up here and she's like down here somewhere at least. Like, and apparently not.
I wish that was established earlier. Is it like that in the graphic novels?
It is. Well, I think he's like horse sized in the graphic novel, and I think we're even like told that centaurs are like fairy sized at the beginning, and I just didn't notice. Like it doesn't say like explicitly like Foley was 3 feet tall, but I vaguely remember it saying like, oh, all the fairy races except for I think trolls are like between 3 and 3.5 feet or something. So it's kind of implied that like centaurs are also small, but I just like never paid attention to it because I guess my brain just like subconsciously rejected that knowledge.
Like, and I'm going to reject that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is gone from my mind. I never need to think about that again.
Yeah, as far as we're concerned, this never happened. This part of the conversation. Let's talk about something else now.
The next thing that I really wanted to like touch on was just like, I don't know, I guess all the inconsistencies between like this book and like previous books. There were a lot of them. Some of the ones that like, oh gosh, what did I say? What was the one that I told you, Kara, right away that like really bothered me? Do you remember? It was a few days ago. Dang it, what was I gonna say? I literally just had it in my head and then it just like popped out. But there were just like so many things that like, like the Butler thing where it like explicitly says like in the third book when he like dies and then that he gets healed, and then when he gets mind wiped, then in the fourth book he's like doesn't understand how suddenly he went from feeling one way to like feeling really old and like tired inside but looked the same on the outside, and like he was like really slowed down, and like the Kevlar in his chest really slowed him down and was like affecting his heart and stuff. And then all of a sudden in this book it's like flipped on its head and he's like, I feel like 15 years younger and I have a bulletproof chest and like all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, no, like that's not even just like it's like sort of like changing it slightly. Like, no, you're saying explicitly the opposite of how this worked a few books ago, and like that like really bothered me. And I feel like there were so many instances like that like, oh, Colfer, maybe you should like reread your books before you like write the next one, because like what is this? You're not making any sense.
I thought when he was talking about how young he was on the inside, I thought he meant like that he was gonna live longer, because they like that's what Foley tells him when like after Holly like saves his life or like brings him back from the dead basically in book 3. Like Butler comments about like how old he's feeling and everything, and Foley's like, well, if it's any consolation, you'll probably live longer than you would like otherwise. So I thought that's what he meant about that, but yeah, that doesn't explain why he's suddenly like not slowed down at all by like the Kevlar and like all these things that were like big issues for like 1 or 2 books. But
was it like ever said before in the previous books that being mesmered like makes you like a zombie?
I thought so.
I thought it makes so you couldn't tell the difference between someone who had been mesmered and like a regular person. Is that the case, or am I incorrect?
I thought I remembered that it said like it slowed your reaction times, like it made you clumsier, especially if like people were fighting it. but I don't remember it. I don't remember it like explicitly comparing them to zombies before, but I do remember one of the books saying how like somebody gets mesmerized. I don't remember who, and it was like, oh, like they weren't as graceful as they would be normally, or something like that.
I just really I don't know. Like I didn't remember them like people really like being slowed down from that, but like I'll accept that. But then I don't like how then he ends up like throwing in the thing about the baby again. This baby really pisses me off that all of a sudden this baby's like a gymnast and he's 8 months old and like all that thing is just like, well, why are you even putting this in here in the first place then? And then also how all of a sudden in all the other books people have been mesmered and like it lasts on them for a really long time. And they will get mesmerized like once every day or a few days or a week, and like they're still under the mesmer, but then all they do is like turn the TV off, and all of a sudden none of these people are under the mesmer anymore. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. This is so inconsistent. And like Butler should know that that's inconsistent, because remember when Holly put Juliet under the mesmer in the first book, and the first time you ever encountered her, and she like still thinks that she's like sitting there watching the TV for like good while, and then he has to like drag her away, and she's like fighting with him and all this stuff, and it's like, let's just turn off the TV and this will fix the situation. It's like, what?
Yeah.
That really bothered me too.
Yeah, the mesmer, that like the inconsistencies with that, like that's a really good point. I thought with the baby thing, I also hated, and it's almost like he included that to like remind us like, oh, like magic is weird and sometimes people have weird reactions to it, and I'm like, we already know this. Like you don't need to have like a stupid random baby for no reason to like remind us that magic is weird. Like we know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, not my favorite part of
that.
What else were we gonna talk about? Let me see if I if you guys think of something else to talk about, go for it. I'm gonna see if I
did notice the Butler Kevlar heart thing, but my first thought was my Bay's got a bulletproof heart. I love it. It's like the title of a fan fiction.
It is. Bulletproof heart. Right. Yeah. Oh my god. Oh. Okay. So, what did we think about like Artemis wanting to end global warming as like his big gesture?
I totally skipped over that part. I didn't even know that was his goal. I mean, I'm for it.
Yeah. Well, and I remember like the first time I read this one being like, where did this come from? Like that came out of nowhere. And this time I'm like, I guess it makes more sense, because I mean, even in the first book, it's like pointed out that like he hates whalers and like he's very like eco-friendly and all of this. So I'm like, I guess it makes sense. Like in the last one, we had his like solar paneled plane that he built. So like I guess it does kind of, it like fits in with like the rest of his character. But like I do think it was kind of weird that like that's how we opened the book, was like his big like presentation. I mean, it basically served to like get all the characters together in one place. And I mean, they end up using the like ice cube cannon thing that he built to like save their lives from the Amorphobots. So like it like serves a purpose in the book, but I just thought that was kind of like, I thought that was a weird choice about like starting the book off that way. Except for like the prologue where it's talking about how like once upon a time Artemis saw things that no one else could see, but now he sees things that are not there. So it's talking about him having like Atlantis Complex in like the prologue, and then like the first chapter is like, and now we're stopping global warming.
I mean, it does work with the fact that Artemis Fowl is like an environmentalist. Question mark. I still find it really funny that in the first book he was anti-whaler but pro-kidnapping and holding someone for ransom. Yeah. It's a very interesting character choice.
And the fact that like he was willing to blow up Root if he had to. like he would get rid of the whaler, but he's like, if someone dies,
don't you dare lay a hand on those whales.
Anti-whaler, but previously, like a year before, was okay with making an animal go extinct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, because he was like 10, right, when he did that, and the first book starts when he's 12. So
yeah.
It is. I think like that goes back to his whole like he's willing to break like so many of his like rules and morals if it's for like a person he cares about, because he like rationalized it as like, well, it's for my dad, like my monkey versus like my father, like how could I not choose my father, kind of thing.
But also, he was Artemis Fowl. Like, he very easily could have gotten that money another way.
Yeah, he could have.
He could have, like, it would have taken a couple days longer, but, like, he easily could have. Mm-hmm. But instead, he, like, sells it.
Yeah, he even says, he even, like, his narration is even, like, there was a part of him that was, like, childishly wanting to, like, punish his mother for, like, the fact that she wasted the money on this monkey. He's like, well, now I'm going to use the monkey to get the money back, and like, and save my dad. So yeah, he's definitely not immune to like, I don't know, making other judgments that have like nothing to do with his like environmental consciousness.
Yeah. I will say though, I feel like the global warming thing was more of an Eoin Colfer thing. Like,
yes.
After reading the books, it's like very clear that he's a very strong environmentalist, which is fine. Like, that's not me saying like authors shouldn't put their own political stances in books. Like, obviously, that's totally fine, but it doesn't seem very consistent with Artemis Fowl. Artemis is an environmentalist, but it feels more like Eoin Colfer doing it than Artemis Fowl being like, oh, I hate whalers, and oh, I'm worried about global warming now.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, like it still is getting more dire, like the longer it goes on without corporations doing something about it. So it makes sense that as the books go on, it becomes more of an issue. But like, yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely, this is like Eoin Colfer's like personal stance that he then saw like, well, I've already shown that like Artemis is kind of an environmentalist, like might as well like things together. From the little I remember about book 8, I remember that being an even stronger theme in that one. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Yeah. I love the message. I just am wondering, because in my mind, I think if Artemis Fowl were going to choose some sort of way to like save the world or whatever, it would be much bougier than this. Like recovering, like, I don't know if you've seen the new Carmen Sandiego cartoon, but like recovering stolen artifacts and bringing them back to their original country, or, I don't know, art charities or whatever, stuff that the 1%ers would do, but I don't know if he would go full on global warming.
I love that. Like, Artemis Fowl would save the world, but it'd be like much bougier. Like, it'd be very, it'd be like Rich Bitch style.
Exactly. Like, I don't know how he would do it, but it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to recycle more or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and like it's like in book 4 at the end of The Opal Deception, when he like steals the painting back and like donates it to a museum. So he's still stealing from people, but it's like for the common good kind of thing. You'd think it'd be something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I wouldn't mind art thief Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see that.
And like when he says that he invested, like, or he's prepared to invest all of his money in this, and I'm like, wow, like, are we supposed to think that like, I don't know, this whole like Atlantis Complex thing is making him not like making him better, but what's the phrase I'm looking for? It's like changing his priorities almost. Like,
yeah,
I think one of the characters even reacts in a way that's like, oh, this is another sign that something's weird. Like, Artemis is willing to put his own money into a project, like warning sign. But
yeah,
I do think like the fact that, or I should ask, like, what did you guys think about like the Atlantis Complex, like him developing this illness like itself? Because it was kind of a surprise, because there wasn't like we haven't heard about this disease before, so in that sense it's kind of like, well, you know, this is out of nowhere. But it makes sense with how like Artemis has gradually been like feeling more and more guilt about the things he did. And plus the fact that he like stole magic that he wasn't supposed to in book 5.
Yeah.
And we see in book 6 how that like really could have affected him negatively. Like he was playing around with things he didn't understand. And then like in book 7, it's like, well, now you got a disease. So going Artemis, like
deal with that.
Yeah. It's like in a way, it's like showing that there are consequences to his actions, which is, you know, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah. So wait, I'm a little lost on how he got the Atlantis Complex. This was just him being around the fairies, or?
No, I think so. So like, you know how like spelltropy was like only a disease that affected magic users?
Yeah.
Atlantis Complex, it's like that, but it's a mental illness. And it's usually so it's like he shouldn't have gotten it, except that he was like dabbling in magic. And and like the things that trigger it are like really intense like feelings of guilt, or they might have listed something else, but what happened for Artemis was kind of like the piling up of like bad things he's been doing for a while. Like he mentions like kidnapping Holly as a big one, but the one that really set him off was what happened to his mother in the last book, and how he was like, that was all my fault. Like it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't, like if like Opal hadn't known who I was and things like that. So I think it's like a disease that only magic users get, and Artemis shouldn't have gotten it, except that he like stole magic, and on top of that, it's like he's had all these feelings of guilt, and he's been doing all of these things for a while now. I think that's how it happened.
Okay, so that's a little clearer. I think it's an interesting concept. I don't know if I have any like opinion on it other than that it really does fit into the sort of tone of this book where, you know, the whole Orion thing coming out and, you know, him being super paranoid. Yeah, I don't really have a solid opinion on this for some reason. I was just like, oh, this is a thing that happens.
Yeah. Well, and obviously I had like a very like specific reaction to it because of like my personal experiences. So like, I recognize that I'm not like neutral about it, you know. So
yeah, I will also say though, I didn't know this book was about a disease until I had started or mental illness until I had started reading it, and then, you know, it started appearing in Artemis. So I was like, wait, this is about like him getting a mental illness? I thought this was about them traveling to Atlantis.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what the cover artist thought. Like, so he like
the cover artist
Artemis. Yeah, he like draws Artemis underwater fighting a giant squid, and then Eoin Colfer's like, okay, I guess there's like, why not both?
I was very much prepared to dislike this because I don't like mermaids for some reason. So I was like, oh, there are gonna be mermaids in this book. I am already not excited.
That's so funny.
That I remember so cool. Like, I love that.
Oh, sorry, what?
I said that would be so cool. I would love that.
I know. I actually like mermaids, but I remember that part where
they could ride seahorses.
That part where Juliet is like, I just have this weird thing about giant squid, and like Foley goes like, don't we all? And I'm like, in a weird way, I get it, because like I also hate giant squid. Like I have this really intense fear of giant squid that is completely unjustified, because like when am I gonna encounter one? But I hate giant squid.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have read Animorphs, but there was like one book with like a giant squid in it, and just I don't like them. No, they're not fun. I don't like them. So
no, I do not like that either.
I think it's the beaks. I don't like the fact that whenever I have read any books with giant squids in them, they would describe them having beaks, and I do not like that. I hate it.
Yeah. Also, like, just the idea of, like, something that's not supposed to be giant being giant is, like, unnerving. And the thing that, like, also freaks me out is, like, the tentacles. Like, I do not like that. I don't. No.
I hate it. Yeah. And the suction cups.
The bee thing is a good point. It's like a Franken monster. Like,
just send it back. I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which apparently other species don't like it either. Like, even fairies don't like the giant squids.
Here, I have the perfect video for you, Kara.
No!
I just watched this earlier today. What you said just fit it so perfectly.
Okay. If it's a giant squid, I'm gonna freak out.
Okay. I don't know why squids bother me, but octopi don't. Like, octopi are pretty cool.
Yeah. I am a little unnerved by how smart they are. Like, scientists keep finding out, like, new things they can do. It's basically like, the octopus are gonna rule us one day. Like,
you know what? I would kind of prefer that.
Honestly, mood. Like,
not to get political, but
yeah, no. Yeah. Agreed. Giselle, you should put it in the comments.
I did. I put it in the comments.
You did?
You did?
It's not showing.
Oh, maybe I'm not allowed to share links. Click on my name and enable me to share links or something, maybe. Or maybe I can put it in our private chat and you can put it in the comments.
Yeah, I'll do that. So everyone can experience this.
I think you can share your screen too, so you can play the video live.
I know. I probably could do that, but I'm still figuring out how to use this program. Like, I don't want to accidentally turn something off I shouldn't, but
did you see it? Can you see it, Kara?
It hasn't.
Even in our private chat? I'll send it to you on Twitter.
Okay, do that, yeah.
The video is called Jurassic Park, but with cats.
Okay. I'm excited.
I watched it earlier today, and I was, like, pissing myself. I thought it was so funny.
Okay, so I just pasted it. Now, is it going to work? I hope.
If you want to watch that.
There it is.
You feel very, very unnerved by things that are not the size that they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to watch. Actually, there should be a way for me to share.
There is a share screen option on my side, on my end.
Really? Okay, then I should definitely be able to.
For me, it's like at the bottom.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Oh. Let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. Sorry, guys, for this detour, but I think really. Okay. Share screen. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about while I figure this out?
I will just say this book was a fun time for me, despite my complaints. You know, I think all the extra butler time was nice, and it was just, I had fun, you know?
Good. I'm glad. I know Giselle did not.
Well, I think talking to you guys has, like, helped alleviate that, like, dread of reading it. I think I'll be able to finish it now, because instead I was, like, seriously considering, like, just skim reading it or, like, whatever, but, like, I really actually do want to read them all, so I will finish it and then I'll read book 8, but I don't know. So I think it also could have just been, like, the timing for me right now. I think maybe I wasn't in the mood for it, so on top of, like, already not enjoying it a lot, like, good thing I started early, though, because otherwise this would not have gotten read at all. Because, like, I haven't read a single. No. But I read like almost 1,000 pages yesterday.
Wow. Yeah, I noticed the same thing about like the only thing about doing like per month like this is that if you happen to pick it up at a time when you don't really feel like it can like affect how you feel about some aspects of the book, you know, like because we don't really have like the luxury of being like, oh, I'll read this like in a couple of weeks or like next month or whatever. If I started reading it near the beginning of the month instead of the end, I would have more options. But Giselle just added. Oh, okay. Are you going to show it? Is it working?
Oh, I guess I can. It's kind of small. I don't know how to make it bigger. I was trying to do it another way. Let me try one other thing. Wait, stop.
This will be some fun bonus content. If you watch to the end, you get a bonus cat video.
Wait, will it let me pull it up here? Wait, now it's not letting me pull it up.
I actually have to add you to the stream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it should be good now, if you want to.
That should be better.
Yeah.
There we go. Is the audio working?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. I watched that this morning.
Now, this species of rare form has been extinct since the Cretaceous period. I mean, this thing is...
Oh, I love it.
I love this so
much. It gets better, though.
Oh my god.
I loved it.
So much. Giselle, thank you. I'm crying. Oh my god. My face hurts from laughing so hard.
Quality content.
Yes.
Chris laughing in the other room.
I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that, Giselle.
You're welcome.
Oh my god.
I sent Chris the link this morning and he didn't watch it, so I know. I was offended too. I sent him a note. That person, if you want to check out their channel, they have a bunch of other ones. Like one of the other ones that I saw was like Spider-Man dancing alongside Michael Jackson, like Thriller, and just like this animated Spider-Man, and some other ones that were really utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I will be bookmarking that video.
That's what I watched at 8 a.m. this morning when I woke up. I was like, first thing when I woke up, I was like on YouTube and I found that, and I don't know how,
but what a gift.
I love it so much. Does anyone have any other things that we wanted to talk about, or like any of you guys in the comments or in the chat? Like, did you guys have a part of the book that you had like specific thoughts about?
I think we covered all that I wanted to cover. I don't know about you guys. We could also figure out the dates for the next
yes,
show.
we should do that for sure.
Pull
It
up
looks
my
like
calendar.
Well, the 1st of September is a Sunday.
Yeah. I think that would be like, I think that's a good time if you guys want to do that.
Yeah. Let's see. Artemis.
Yeah, I think that's good. 'Cause...
And Taylor, I think it's on your channel, right?
Yes, and that'll be our last show.
I know.
And so we're probably not just going to be talking about the book. We're probably going to be talking about our overall thoughts.
Yes.
So it'll be even more in-depth.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. I'm very excited to talk about my overall thoughts on the series, but I'm also sad that it's going to be ending.
I know.
Especially since I have no clue what's going to happen in this last book. It really is a wild card.
Yeah. I remember something.
I
don't like that look on your face.
They're not like one single thing I remember about book 8. And it's a big thing. Christopher was like deciding whether or not he feels like finishing the series, and I'm like, honestly, I don't blame you if you don't feel like it. I was like, I only remember one thing, and if I tell you what it is, it just spoils the whole book. So
yeah, it's like I think the last book is important, but there are also some things about it where it's like, I pretend this didn't happen. Like, but there are a couple of like really, really good scenes in it. So like, I think it's worth reading at least once, so you can decide if you ever want to read it again or think about it again, you know, like
I'm so scared.
What?
I'm so scared.
I know, I don't want to like put you off before you've even read it. I think it's the one, like, I think I've only read The Last Guardian twice. Once when it came out, and one time when I was doing like a full reread of the series. So it's definitely the book I have like the least experience with. So I'm just curious to see how I feel about it and like how much I remember. Yeah, like there's some good things for sure about it, but yeah, it's definitely a very interesting. I'm very gonna. I can't talk. I'm gonna be very interested in discussing it and seeing how everyone feels.
I'm so excited, but also not.
I know. Yeah, I know. I'm also really sad it's gonna be our last one.
Yeah. And we don't even have the movie to keep us company afterwards.
I know, because of their stupid schedule change. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
I know. I'll probably read the new graphic novel that came out like right after finishing the 8th book, because I'm gonna need more.
More content.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you gonna read that in September, do you think?
I don't know. Whenever I finish The Last Guardian, it'll probably be soon after that I read it. Yeah. I mean, I think so. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind, but at this point, that's what I feel like I'm gonna do. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes. I think we covered pretty much everything that I was gonna mention. And Chris said his favorite part of the book was when the giant cats came and ate little mini horse Foley. That was a good scene. I agree.
Yeah, my favorite.
Also, it makes a lot, like, not to go back to this revelation we're all going to delete from our minds, but it makes a lot more sense why Foley hates the confrontation part so much. He's tiny. Like, no wonder he doesn't want to be in the field. Like, he's a teeny baby horse.
So tiny.
So small.
I really don't like the image of it like a Shetland pony with like a man torso. I don't like it.
No. I reject that image.
He is a tall, majestic man pony, and no one can change my mind on that one.
Yeah, who knows? In the next book, Eoin Colfer might forget how big he is. So doesn't matter.
Howard over Butler.
It's just yeah. Okay, so if there's nothing else that we were gonna say, our next live show is gonna be September 1st. Our last live show actually is gonna be September 1st. At 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, like our other ones have been, and it's gonna be on Taylor's channel. And we'll be discussing The Last Guardian and our like overall feelings about the series, I imagine. Yeah, so and also this is like a great opportunity to like catch up. Like I know Laura, I don't know if you guys know Laura from Bookie Laura, but like she got a little bit behind. She's great. Yeah, she got a little bit behind on the books and she was like feeling bad about it, and I'm like, this is a great time to catch up. Like we've all got a month to kind of like catch up with like the rest of the series before we discuss like the whole thing completely. I know I'm gonna try and start the 8th book before like the last couple days of the month, so I can end strong. But yeah, like I have really been enjoying this, and I'm excited to talk to you all for the last book. Yeah. Any other closing thoughts, or do we want to end the broadcast?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, same.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us, and see you September 1st. And end broadcast.